today. It is also customary tradition to acknowledge countries we pass through. So today we are here on Camaraocan country, and I'd like to acknowledge elders past and present for their ongoing and continual guidance as we go through country. So John Michael, can I hand over to you today? Thank you.
Okay, from Berlin, Germany, University of Potsdam. Yeah. Rebecca Lazarides. Close. Going to talk to us about the relationship between teacher motivation on the one hand and students' motivation and outcomes on the other, trying to connect the dots, I think, the link between them. And we're catching her on a good day. She just got news this morning from early that her symposium was accepted. So a little positive affect manipulation there. That'd be good. And if you read her research, a lot of articles in learning and instruction, teacher and teacher education, on a lot of it on teacher motivation, real core interest in there. Okay. And the title and the floor.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here and to meet you all, and I'm happy to discuss this research with you after the talk, and I'm here the whole day. So this evening I will fly out to Melbourne again, but until the evening I'm here. So I would be happy to talk to you and speak about teacher motivation pathways to student motivation without and with AI. That's the title of my talk. So that's a topic I do research on for some years. So we are interested in why and how motivated teachers who are really engaged in what they do achieve well in motivating their students. So some teachers do, they are highly motivated, they aim for motivated students, and they do motivate their students. Students perceive learning as a joyful and playful experience, which is nice, but other teachers are motivated and enthusiastic, but they do not achieve to motivate their students. So why is that? So why is this pathway to student motivation in some instances existing and in others not? That's the question we have, and that's a question about which I will talk today. I brought you some results from research projects we have, and I couldn't decide with what to start. First, I wanted to focus only on AI, but then I thought it's not so nice to not explain you why we got to this way to AI. So I will start with our more classical work on the TEACH project with Ulrich Schieferle. That's a project we have since 2018 together. And the new generation of this research project is now running until next year. So this is a project on large-scale survey, teacher motivation measures, and student motivation measures, classical research as you might know it. And then we come to AI in our Research Center of Excellence, Science of Intelligence, in which I'm one of 21 PIs, and where we work together in interdisciplinary work with computer scientists, computer vision people, machine learning people, to uncover processes. So lastly, I'd like to introduce you to a new research project that has not yet been started. So it's funded, but it will start in May, and it's focusing on large language modeling. But we did some pilot work on this in preparation of the grant proposal, and that's what I brought you today. That's more focusing on motivational speech. And we spoke a lot about this yesterday evening with John Marshall Reeve and his team, to identify teachers' motivational messages as a process. So first of all, we are interested in the pathways between teacher and student motivation, and we find these effects in many cross-sectional studies. So there are correlations between teacher motivation and student motivation. There's longitudinal work also showing that these pathways are here. And very often we would think, because motivational theories assume that motivation is driving our actions and behaviors, that teachers would perform well in their teaching behaviors. And through this, there is a link to student motivation, which is also shown in quite a lot of cross-sectional work and some longitudinal work. So we have very nice reviews on this. There was this special issue of Fanny Lauerman and Ruth Butler about the effects and elusive links between teacher motivation and student motivation in Educational Psychologist in 2021. And I particularly liked one systematic review of Lisa Badab and Rob Klassen, where they say there is a need to track the signal from teacher motivation to student motivation. Most studies are based on self-reports. Most studies are correlational. And there is some work that's showing that teacher goals, interests, values, self-efficacy, and all the other motivational facets matter for student motivation, but the links to instruction are quite elusive because there is not much consistent empirical evidence showing that teachers' motivation matters for their behaviors. So we have some studies showing this, others not. And the question is, why is that? So what I liked about this systematic review of Lazarides and Rob Classen was that they had a very systematic approach of explaining why this could be the case. Why do we not find links across studies? First of all, it could be a conceptual problem. So we did a systematic review last year, and we found that, for example, some studies assume that teacher self-efficacy predicts teachers' enthusiasm, which then predicts their instructional behaviors. While other studies assume teacher enthusiasm predicts their self-efficacy, predicts their behaviors. Very often, they don't say why they believe this order, this particular order they examine on a conceptual level is correct. So they just somehow test the order of variables, often trait-level motivations that predict other trait-like motivations that predict instructional behavior. So as Bardach and Classen put it, there are conceptual deficits in current research, and there are also methodological deficits. So for example, most work is based on teacher self-reports. So relations are overestimated by common method biases, even if we have student self-reports. Then most work is cross-sectional. Measures are often measuring teacher motivation on a very, very general level. So the typical Bandura self-efficacy scale, how able do you think you are in collaborating with parents, collaborating with your colleagues, speak to your principal, and then there's an item on teaching. And then we would assume that there are direct effects on specific teaching tasks like classroom management. So this is often the case, that we have very general teacher motivation measures predicting very, very specific teaching tasks, and their signals get lost. And then we have misalignment. So we would have teacher scales, which are very specific, and student scales that do not match these teacher scales. That's another methodological problem that we face. And to overcome these problems, we had in our TEACH project discussed a lot how can we really address these deficits. So one thing that we did was that we decided to have only certain motivation theories that we address, like interest theory, SABT, social cognitive theory. We have teacher measures about these theories, student measures about these theories, and we would have instructional practices embedded in these theories, and then we test their interrelations. Then we have parallel measures for students and teachers. Then we have very specific teacher motivation measures that are not too broad. And we tried like this to overcome somehow the existing deficits, not all, it's not perfect, but it's an approach. We used so the analyses that I'll present to you in the next slides are based on our longitudinal sample, which is 50 teachers and their 1,100 something students. And that's a longitudinal sample. We have more teachers, but as you can see, our study happened during COVID. So we lost a lot of teachers from wave 1 to wave 2. And that's also something we need to think about when we integrate these findings on the longitudinal level. We focus in our longitudinal work only on those teachers and their classrooms where teachers didn't change, groups would stay in the same composition, and teachers would have participated in more than 2 out of 3 waves. And that's the model that we tested in our first paper. It's called Tracing the Signal. So it's kind of an answer to the Classen and Bardach paper that's called Searching for the Signal. And we believe that we would find certain pathways from teacher motivation to instruction to student motivation. Our assumption was to find a behavioral pathway through classroom management, an effective support pathway that's more about the effective support students would perceive from their teachers and the capability that teachers believe they have of supporting their students, and then a cognitive pathway that's more about cognitive activation. What we found was a very clear behavioral pathway. So even when controlling for other teacher motivation facets like their educational interest or didactic interest, and for other teacher self-efficacy components, we find that teacher self-efficacy for classroom management is the strongest predictor of student perceived classroom management, 1 year later, and that this then controlled for prior levels of interest predicts student interest. There was and what I show you are only the class level effects of our structural equation modeling. So there was an individual level, but we didn't focus on this. Then we have here a very clear effective support pathway. Teachers' self-efficacy for student engagement would predict how students perceive the effective support in their class and how interested they are then indirectly. We did not find a very clear cognitive instructional pathway, so teacher self-efficacy for instruction did not, as we assumed, directly affect cognitive activation as perceived by students, but as Uli Schiefel's prior work showed, educational interest of teachers did, and an explanation could be that teachers were interested in the relationship building with their students, in the pedagogy. They have an inner attitude of how to approach students' cognitive processes, and therefore they are very effective in providing cognitive stimulating learning environments. This was our explanation. If you want to know more about this paper, it's published in GEP in 2024, and I think I had a QR code on one of the slides where you can, but let's go to this later. What we found was a very pronounced behavioral and affective support pathway in this study. We also found transmission effects that were strongly pronounced, and we believe that's because there was a strong matching of teacher and student scales. And we also found that aligned constructs provide strong explanations. So that's a methodological angle that we think we should align measures, and then we will find more clear effects. We were quite happy with these results, at the same time unhappy, because, you know, as researchers, we are always unhappy in the end of studies. We think there must be more, and then we didn't ask the right questions. And in this case, we thought that's a longitudinal large-scale self-report study. Everyone's doing this, but we do not really know now why teachers who are motivated provide high-quality instruction. So we were happy because we found these links. We were unhappy because we didn't know the why. So what's in this box between teacher motivation and instruction? We don't know yet. So one approach to know more about this question was to carry out a systematic review, which we did and which is under review now, and I hope will be published soon. We got the reviews, we answered them, we will see what reviewers will say. And the question here was, which processes, psychological processes, exist between teacher motivation and their behaviors? Are there studies on this? What do they find? Exclusion criteria were that we only focused on English language studies. We included gray literature. We only included quantitative work. We focused on studies that were assessing a teacher motivation component, a teaching behavior, and a process in between these variables. And we didn't find much. So you can see 16 studies were included at the end. It was a lot of work doing this, and we didn't find much, but what we found was interesting. We found that most studies of these 16, which is not much, focus on self-efficacy, and then followed by teacher goals, teacher values, teachers' autonomous motivation. So there is, despite this rich theoretical background, so we have theories on this. For example, goal theory assumes that teachers' goals somehow, or self-efficacy theory assumes that social cognitive theory assumes that teacher self-efficacy would enable them to be more persistent, to have realistic goals, to invest effort, to have the right intentions, and then this would end up in a good teaching performance. Also, we have these models and the descriptions of those models. There is no testing. And most testing that exists is on self-reported data, is not experimental, is mostly based on teacher self-reports, is correlational. So we don't know much. And what we know, you can see here, these are the processes that these 16 studies investigated, is emotional experiences, but then often assessed as a trait-like construct, like your general enjoyment of teaching, which is not really an emotional. If you take it down to a process, it's not really a process happening there, engagement, attitudes. And then, for example, there were some studies studying teachers' enthusiasm or reference norm orientation as a process between teacher motivation and instruction. But we were very inclusive in this systematic review. So we accepted a lot of work that we thought it could be a process, could not be a process. we thought there is a lot of work that has to be done here. So the best way to do new work is always to have a conceptual model, which is why in this systematic review, we, out of the empirical evidence that we found, we developed this conceptual model that you can see here, which is a model that we also use as a model for research schemes that we submitted to our funding agency. And in this structured funding scheme, we want with 10 PIs to find out more about the processes that mediate teachers' dispositional motivations and the teaching quality they provide. And we, from the systematic review and from the theories we have in motivational research, we would assume that there are behavioral processes, cognitive processes, and affective processes mediating. And in the next few minutes, I want to direct your attention more to the behavioral processes as a mediator between teacher motivation and traits like teaching quality, things that are happening in classrooms. So based on this model that is assuming that such processes are situational or situated, that's the difference, but that they need to be captured not with self-report trait-like measures, but we use AI to assess them and detect them. We carried out some research in our research cluster of excellence science of intelligence, where we collaborate with computer vision people to access the behavioral processes happening between teacher motivation and instructional quality. So that's what we focus on, teacher immediacy, nonverbal immediacy. That's a very broad construct. And there is some work trying to disentangle it from teachers' displayed enthusiasm or displayed emotions. And this work that's trying to do so assumes that this behavior is about the eye contact with students, proximity to students, physical distance, similar to proximity, gestures that teachers would use. It's very old research, and there were some papers in meta-analyses showing that there are positive effects with moderate effect sizes on students' affective motivational outcomes, not so much on cognitive outcomes, more smaller effect sizes. What you just saw was a sample video from the TALIS study that we use for our analyses. And our objective in this project is first to detect such nonverbal immediate behaviors of the teachers using computer vision methods based on this data of the TALIS video study that is publicly available. So the data that we use to detect nonverbal immediacy of teachers using computer vision methods is the German TALIS video study. There are 50 teachers who provided 3 lesson videos, each focusing on mathematics, on the topic of quadratic equations. So that's standardized. The problem is that in the German sub-study, the 3rd video was kind of voluntary, so teachers could hand in a 3rd video, and it did not need to focus on quadratic equations. And it, in very many instances, was after the post-test of the survey. So for our longitudinal analysis, we exclude this 3rd video because it somehow could cause disturbances. But teachers, on average, had 3 videos recorded. These 50 teachers have 1,140 students in their classrooms, and that's the design. So we have a pre-test before the lessons that were video recorded, where teachers and students are asked. These are the usual TALIS measures. I don't know if you are familiar with them, but it's self-efficacy of teachers, enthusiasm of teachers, how teachers perceive the lesson quality or their overall teaching quality, like autonomy, supportive teaching, for example. And there are student measures also assessing teaching quality and teachers' enthusiasm. Then teachers would video record their lessons. 2 video recordings are really between pre-test and post-test. In the German subsample, we have a 3rd video happening when after the pre-test. We don't know when. We have time stamps, and they tell us it's often after the post-test. And then usually after the 2nd video, we would have a post-test, again measuring teacher and student data. And then we have a follow-up test 6 weeks after the post-test that's measuring, again, student and teachers' motivation and perceived instructional quality. So with this data, we developed the computer vision model to track teachers' nonverbal immediacy on these videos. First of all, we selected the frames that we could use for computer vision analysis, which is really very difficult. We had to go through all the videos to segment them. So we segmented them into 30-second segments. And we selected, first of all, those videos that would show no excessive camera movements and where you could see the teacher and where the teacher would give a frontal presentation. That's also a limitation of the study that you can afterwards discuss with him critically. So in all of these lessons, teacher would give frontal presentations. We do not have group work or other things. And the teacher needs not to leave the video frame. So these videos that we identified were then segmented into small frames, and the frames, 403 frames that we identified and used, were even segmented into very, very small segments of 30-second instances. We then trained human raters, 3 human raters, to classify teachers' gestures, to classify teachers' body posture, whether it was very strict or whether it was more relaxed, and to classify classify teachers' nonverbal immediacy as a construct. We used the slider scale, so research assistants and PhD students would have intense trainings, piloting, discussing a lot about what they found until we had a kappa that was okay. And then we used this pipeline. If you want to know more about our algorithm, you can find the published paper here under this QR code. So that's the computer vision paper. So we have one PhD student on the computer vision side who's published this algorithm. And then we have another PhD student on my side, educational psychology, who's more working on the process from teacher motivation to student motivation and how to use the algorithm to capture like really what's happening in the class. So that's our pipeline. First of all, we had these input videos that I just explained to you, the 2 videos from the teachers or 3. Then we did a depth image, which means that objects were classified. That's the teacher, these are the students, and then distances were measured. So we could say, which distance does this teacher have to the most proximal student? Is it a very strong distance for the whole lesson? Or is this teacher like really approaching people, speaking to them, explaining stuff, then going back, explaining stuff on the board? So what's the teacher doing? Then we had fine-tuned residual network architecture to track people's body posture using skeletons. So the movements were tracked. And then we have a library approach assessing teachers' core emotions that they display on their faces. And we also have ratings, human ratings, and the model of the nonverbal immediacy score. What you see here, ICC, is what you know, intra-class correlation. It's a 2-way random model with 3 human raters. Each human rater rated each video. So every person did everything. The ICC values that you can see here are compared with the model. So we have the algorithm and we have the human raters, and their correlation is 0.69. So 6.9. I also have another slide that I can show you in the appendix that gives more information about all the intra-class correlations, but I cut it off because it would have run too long. So these were the best scores we could get. Like really, we tried to optimize it, include, exclude videos and whatever, but that's what we so far as we could get. But it's still okay. Oh, sorry. Too quick. So what we did then, and that's the work of us, like that's a publication that's written by me and my colleagues in the British Journal of Educational Psychology, is that I wanted to know whether this algorithm is now a link between teachers' motivation, like their self-efficacy for student engagement, and their instruction, like a trait like student perceived, teacher displayed enthusiasm in class. So is this process measure explaining what's happening in between? This was the question I showed you in the beginning with the question mark, what's in this box? So to open up this box, we first of all checked with what is on a classroom level this nonverbal immediacy correlated. And it's correlated with students' perceptions of teachers' displayed enthusiasm. So really the enthusiasm as a teaching trait, not as a motivational construct. And then with students' interest before the lesson and after the lesson, and marginally significantly with the follow-up test 6 weeks later, student interest. And then we turned to this, again, you only see class level processes. It's a manifest latent model here. And what you can see is that we found a significant effect of teacher self-efficacy for student engagement, predicting what the machine learning ratings were about their nonverbal immediacy. Then this classroom aggregate of teachers' nonverbal immediacy would predict what students on average in a classroom report about the teacher's enthusiasm displaying class. This in turn is correlated or predicted, here it's a regression, but at the same time point with students' interest after the lesson. And this in turn then predicts follow-up interest 6 weeks later. So this can be criticized a lot. Reviewers did criticize it a lot. I do criticize it a lot myself because we don't find like a direct pathway from teachers' nonverbal immediacy to students' follow-up test interest. We have indirect effects, but not the ones I assumed to find, because there was no indirect effect from teacher self-efficacy for student engagement to student-reported enthusiastic teaching through nonverbal immediacy. But I believe it's because it might be underpowered. We have 46 teachers here, so it's really a small sample, and we need more teachers in their classrooms to validate these findings. But it's a first step. As all research is always a first step. So, well. In sum, we have nonverbal behaviors of teachers that might be an underlying mechanism between their motivation and their teaching quality. We achieved well in establishing a machine learning algorithm and method to do what humans raters would do in resource-intense, time-intense work. So we hope that we can use this for other videos. Next, I present you now another study on the same data set. And our next studies will be on other data sets so that we can validate it across data sets. And limitations, there are a bunch of limitations. So this list could be 30 slides long, but limitations are that it's only classroom level. So I had the feeling after this study, we lost the situational focus we have here. So I want to focus more on the situations that happen. And the question is, we have here very closely aligned constructs. So teachers' nonverbal immediacy is very, very conceptual close to teachers' displayed enthusiasm. It's like no surprise that we find these relations. So our question afterwards was, how is this related to more distal support dimensions like autonomy support or relational support? And that's the second study I'd like to introduce to you today. That's a study that I just submitted, and I will see. So these are preliminary results, and they will change a lot during the review process, but I thought I'd bring it along anyway. So we have, again, the very same sample, 50 teachers, lesson videos. Just in this case, I did not focus on student ratings. I skipped the student ratings in the student sample. I focus on the lesson videos and on observer ratings of these lesson videos. In Thales, we have the wonderful opportunity to have multimodal data. So we have observer ratings of teaching quality during the lessons on 16-minute segments. And we have teacher reports, and we have this machine learning algorithm, and we combined it in this study. That's the data structure that I used for this study. So we have teachers on level 1, 50, lessons on level 2, situations on level 3. The observer ratings in Thales happen every 16 minutes. And using the timestamps in the dataset, we were able to match them with the 30-second segments of our machine learning algorithm. So we knew what happened at the same time. And being able to do so, we have situations. We have 900 situations that we can use here on level 1, 150 lessons we can use on level 2, 50 lessons for teachers that we have on level 3. And that's the model that I tested. It's a schematic depiction, so you get an idea of what I tested. So we assume that NV, nonverbal immediacy as a machine learning score would be related to teacher-rated post-lesson relationship behavior, autonomy support, but also to observer ratings of emotional support, encouragement, and warmth during the lesson, and as well as students' cognitive engagement during the lesson. And we assume to find this on different levels of analysis. So, what did we find? First of all, I think one interesting result is that this nonverbal immediacy is only partially an attribute of teachers' personality or trait. 20% of this nonverbal immediacy were explained by the teacher level. Then we have socio-emotional support ratings and student cognitive engagement ratings, and the support that happened in class was 0.40 ICC, so it's much more attributable to the classroom level than our nonverbal immediacy score is. Then we have the lesson level. Here we have 6% of the nonverbal immediacy being explained by the lesson that happened. That's a little bit above this cutoff value that we assume to be substantial of 5% intra-class correlation. We have observer ratings of socio-emotional support. 26% are explained by the lesson level. And then we have the situational level. We have a lot of unexplained variance on the situational level in our nonverbal immediacy score. What we find, and I think that's quite interesting, is that nonverbal immediacy as a machine learning algorithm score is positively correlated or related here in regression analysis with autonomy support rated by teachers themselves after the lesson, but not with the relational support they think they provide. And that's kind of interesting finding. We discussed this. So is nonverbal immediacy some kind of part of autonomy supportive teaching? Is it because teachers have this inner attitude of, today I support the self-determined learning process, and if they do so they have this plan, they really do this, then they would also like show a friendly face when explaining stuff, have a relaxed body posture, explaining things with a lot of gestures, and that's like a component of autonomy supportive teaching. While I think relationship building is much more complex. You need to talk to students, you respect them, they have the feeling you're interested in them, and you need to know them for a long time. So it's maybe not really correlated with how teachers smile during the lessons. So that could be a potential conceptual explanation for these differential effects that we find. And so I think main findings here are that we found some lesson-specific variance in our nonverbal immediacy score, and that we found that it's only partially explainable by teachers' trait characteristics. So it's not like this teacher personality assumption, one teacher is like this, another is like this. It's really the context that matters in terms of lesson-specific characteristics that shape how teachers display things in class. And what we also find is this differential effects, yes, for autonomy supportive teaching, no for relationship building. Again, we were happy on the one side with these results, unhappy on the other side, because it's very reductive. Like I presented these findings at German university, and they said, well, that's just reaction, action, reaction research, and the teacher does this, and the student does this, and that's very behavioral, and how can you do this? And we thought, well, we really don't know much about the context. We don't know what they talk. They could say very mean things and have a smile on their face, and we would not realize this because we only see what they do on a nonverbal level, and that's really not cool. So we'd like to know more about their language, but like to get access to their language, we also want we do not want to have 1 million research assistants going through lesson transcripts, signing them, and then 3 years later we know what they say. So let's develop a large language model, and that's what I now in this last part of the presentation. And afterwards we can discuss. I know it's a lot, and cognitive load is maybe not as high. You're all quick thinkers, but we can discuss it then. So the next thing I'd like to present you is our work on large language models that we started 2 years ago. And our objective here is to train and fine-tune a large language model based on human ratings of STT-based motivational messages. Here we use a sample of pre-service teachers because we did not have yet access to the in-service teachers. And that's mainly the work of my PhD student, Olivia Metzner. She will present this work at Early. She did it at ICM, so maybe you already came across her work. And we do this work together with Indong Wang and Gérard de Mello at the Computer Institute of our university. It's Hasso-Plattner Institute. So we use here in this study that I'll present you in the next slides, data of 137 pre-service teachers. I created a school network in 2016 when I started my assistant professorship at University of Potsdam, and I got in contact with teachers and I wanted to know what they do. So we have teachers, and then we decided to change teacher education a bit in my module, and we sent bachelor students out to schools. So they gain real classroom experiences. They can do one lesson, and then they see the video recordings reflect on this lesson. So that's kind of a different thing. But we made use of this in this study because we gave them consent papers and asked them, can you use this also for research? And then we had their lesson videos and the transcripts of the lesson videos. And this all happened afterwards. So we thought, oh, we have all these videos. That's such a nice idea. Let's use it, because now we have large language models. And that's happening to most of educational psychology people. They have data, and then they have new tools, and now we use the new tools for all the data. So what we did was we had our pre-service teachers teaching and video recording themselves. Then we get transcripts using an AI-based software. Germany is super regulated. You might know this. So we can only use one AI-based software because it's following the data protection rules of our university. Then we have a STT-based motivational messages coding scheme, which we developed based on Amadi's work of motivational styles. Then we had 2 human raters going through the transcripts, double ratings, 25%. They had a kappa of 0.73 in the end, and then we said, okay, now we are ready to go. We had a skewed distribution. Pre-service teachers would use autonomy supportive teaching messages, competence supportive messages, relational supportive messages a lot, but they would not use thwarts. So they do not pressure its students. That sounds nice, but probably it's also because they are very insecure. So they think I'm friendly, so I gain these students and I can work with them better. We don't know how it is with in-service teachers. I would bet it's different. So we AI generated the messages that we had a lack of. So we used ChatGPT to generate thwartening messages. Then we had in-service teachers looking at these AI-based messages. And then they said, yeah, that's not useful. And yes, that's really happening in class. And after this process, we used them to train and fine tune our model. So we, with all this data, like the real data and the AI-based data, we trained and fine tuned a model, and then we evaluated the model performance. So Olivia is working now on a manuscript. It's in the 2nd revision, so it's hopefully published soon, though that I could, for the next talk, bring in early to this publication as well. That's our coding scheme. So I thought for some of you it might be interested. What are our categories? What are typical examples for these categories? So for example, autonomy supportive message would be asking learners about their learning experience. And then an example is, please open the fingerboard. Write down some keywords about what you liked about this teaching unit and what you found to be less interesting. Autonomy thwart would be, you should be able to explain this better. So I brought more examples, but we can go deeper into this later on. So these are subcategories of autonomy supportive messages. It would be explaining the reasoning behind tasks, methods, content, and so on, asking learners about their learning experience, additional materials to work on for students, and then you want to get this call?
All right.
And then we would have autonomy thwarts, use of pressuring language, setting pressuring deadlines, or pre-providing solutions and answers. And that's all taken from Amadi, but Amadi in his paper, or their paper, I mean, you were co-authors, some of you, had 57 categories, and that's just too much. The large language model only works with really very small categories that we can find and detect. So what we found is this. We found that 30% of all messages that were identified as being motivational messages were autonomy supportive in pre-service teachers, and competence supportive, small share. So we have 29% of competence supportive messages, and relatedness support happening in 20% of the motivational messages. And then, as you can see, nearly no one used like competence thwarts or autonomy thwarts and relatedness thwarts. So these results, or these human ratings, were then used to train and fine-tune our model, 80% of the data. And then 20% of this data was used to evaluate the model performance. And that's the publication that Olivia is currently working on. For details, we used the large language model Gamma 2, but we experimented with a lot of different large language models because we were not sure which one is the best. So this one turned out to be very handy. And yes, it's free download, open source software, so it's good to use. These are our accuracy scores. We would aim for accuracy scores greater than 0.7. There are no real cutoff values. That's what computer science people tell me all the time when I ask for cutoff values. They say there are no cutoff values, but 0.7 is usually published. So F1 scores are for the supportive messages, all above the 0.7 cutoff value. But for thwarts, also because we really didn't have much, but we also do not have much accuracy. So out of the main data is good. So it's also about above 0.7. And that's what we found. And that was that because of these results, we decided to, in the next studies with this data set, take out the thwartening messages. We cannot use them for further analyses of path models, but we can use these supportive messages that we have. And that's what Olivia is right now doing. Like, she's connecting teacher self-efficacy scores with languages, with motivational messages in class, and checking how this predicts class ratings of teaching quality. So that's what she's currently working on. To sum up, we have this fine-tuned large language model being able to validly detect supportive messages, not thwarting messages. And we have an imbalanced distribution. We work now on the TALIS data and lesson transcripts to use this with in-service teachers and to have some kind of comparison for pre-service and in-service teachers. Would they use similar percentages of supportive messages or thwarting messages? Is it comparable? We want to do the whole process for the TALIS data again, because we're not sure if this large language model is really valid in in-service teacher data. So that's what we are currently doing. So to sum up my talk a bit, we have this teacher data, which told me we need to know more about the processes that we are investigating. We were able to develop a reliable and valid AI-based detection of nonverbal behaviors, and a large language model that's having valid estimations of motivational messages based on self-determination theory. But although these AI-based methods might be very helpful because they save resources, we do not need these millions of research assistants rating data. Well, we need to be very careful because we need to think about ethics. So we have personal data, and if you use secondary data, these people never agreed on anything about large language models. So that's something we carefully need to check. So because it's a publicly available data set, we always need to submit like applications to use this data for certain purposes, which we are doing, and then it's checked, and then we need to have a lot of stuff on ethics while submitting these applications. So it's ensured that it's okay what we are doing here. And I think it's very nice that these process-oriented things that are coming into educational research a lot are linking now more us with other disciplines like computer science. But at the same time, it's very difficult to do so because our computer scientists are not keen to work with educational psychologists on very applied topics. So it's really difficult to get them motivated to do so. We can like argue we would have positions for you, but that's only if we get grants through that have these positions. So we would need to have research questions on the computer vision side, for example, as well. And that's quite difficult. So that's something we struggle with a lot. And I think it's nice that we somehow have now access to this black box of psychological processes in a different way. And I think that's it. So thank you for being attentive, for being here, and for listening.
I actually want to leave the questions.
Could you just open up the black box for us a little bit? I got the nonverbal behavior. I got the facial expressions and gestures and distance. What else is in that black box? How do you get from teacher motivation? Like you had two other categories. That was behavioral category. You had cognitive and emotional.
Yes, so in our conceptual model, we first reviewed all this theories that exist. So, for example, there is this. So there is this special issue of Ruth Butler and Fanny Lauerman, and they also have their own conceptual model, which says there are intentions, for example, that are very important. And then we have goal theory saying it's all about student-oriented goals that teachers set. Then we have socio-cognitive theory, effort, persistence, attention, realistic goal setting, again, goal setting. Then we have Holzberger and Kunter, who work a lot on teacher enthusiasm, claiming that it's attention. So positive emotions increase your ability to be attentive. And then you do this. So from all of this conceptual work that exists, we build these boxes. So we think it's probably not everything that exists, but it's an approach. So we have cognitive processes like attention or memory, work memory. We would have affective processes like emotional experiences that drive then, again, cognitive processes are correlated with such. And then we would have these behavioral processes that I just showed you. But it's probably, I mean, it needs to be wider and it needs to be refined, but it's something.
And it's all very new, like you said. You look for the processes and found 16 studies that are.
Yeah, not much studies. Yeah.
Most of the focus of your looking at teacher behavior on student outcomes. Have you looked at the reciprocal relations? Because I'm sure that the student outcomes influence the student context. You know, the body of students influences the teacher motivation.
Yeah. So in fact, we did a lot of work on this, and I first had it in the presentation, and then I thought it's. So, but I brought the slides if you like to see them. So we have a paper. So I like this Nurmi and Curie paper where they say evocative effects of students on teachers. And they claim like there are student characteristics like temperament or temper that would affect teachers' motivations and how teachers behave. And driven by these theoretical assumptions, with Uli, we had this model here, which I wanted to bring to this presentation, but then I didn't. So we tested reciprocal relations between teacher self-efficacy on the one hand, teaching behavior in the middle, and student outcomes, and teacher enthusiasm, again, behaviors and student outcomes. We didn't find any. So what we found is here. So we found a clear track from teacher self-efficacy to student perceived teaching behaviors to student outcomes. We found this not for achievement, only for student emotions as outcomes. And for teachers' enthusiasm, we didn't find much, but no reciprocal effects as well. I mean, that's one study. That's not evidence of one case study, but I think Doris Holzberg in her research on teacher self-efficacy found similarly that there is a more stronger teacher-driven effects than student-driven effects. But maybe we look at wrong data because this is all longitudinal long-term data. So if we would look at this at a situational focus, so like Francis' work on dyadic interactions between teachers and students with eye tracking, I think she shows that there are reciprocal effects in like the diets of teachers and students and how they have facial expressions to each others. And it's teacher and student driven. So maybe if we look more at situations instead of long-term data, we would find what Pondura says about these reciprocal effects.
Anecdotally, I have the sense that some classes are fun to teach because of the students that are in. Some classes are hard to teach. And that would influence the teacher motivation. We did do one study where we had the same group of students, the students were the same. They had lots of different teachers and so forth, and they were able to show there that teacher interest was more a function of the group of students that was in the class than something about the teacher.
Yeah, so I can imagine that this exists for sure. I know this work of Benjamin Faut, Don't Blame the Teacher, and he shows in this paper that students perceive the teaching quality of the teacher differently from classroom to classroom. So given these classroom differences, probably it also affects teachers' motivation. The fact that we don't find this in this data, or Doris is not finding that in her data, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Maybe it means that we don't look at it right. It's, I assume there would be reciprocal effects, yeah. Teresa.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. I was wondering, have you brought or have you linked the nonverbal thing you've created with the large language model results?
That's a slide I took out. Because that's a thing I want to do. Oh, it's not here. I took it out. So that's a paper I want to work on. While I now produce a lot of papers with this nonverbal media score, C-score, because I thought I had to get this out. We are now working on the large language model for the TALIS data. So we are doing this already. And sure, the next step is to combine it. But I need the large language model for this data first. I don't want to use ChatGPT because one-shot methods I would not go for this. But as soon as we have this model, I will combine it shorter. Yes. We're just not that far. Yeah. I don't know who was first. I saw you and you and you, but I think you were first.
I just wanted to ask about the video presentation. Because I'm also doing a similar study, video and practitioners and their patients and looking at outcomes about.
Oh yes, yeah.
So it's so interesting to me. But I wondered about was everybody aware that they're being videoed?
Yes.
Because it does change in nonverbal behaviour.
Oh, yes.
So that was.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think it really changes our.
It's like with quantum theory. As soon as you look at the quant, it's changing its interconnections with the other one. Yeah, yeah.
You relatedness, like in terms of you start to behave because you know someone's looking at you.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it would probably not go with any ethics to say just teach and then I record your teaching. So at least we could not use it for research. I have no idea. I guess it changes, but people tell that they forget that they. I mean, like I don't like so much to be videotaped because you think, oh, but then you forget and you talk.
But it wasn't obtrusive though. Like, was it hidden or not hidden? But like, they know it's been videotaped, but was it in their eye line that they could see the difference?
Oh, for TALIS, I think the setup is you have this classroom, and if I would be a teacher standing here, there's camera, and there. So I believe it is the setup, so they see the cameras.
It's how as a whole film for the country.
Yes.
It's in your face.
For our students, it's different because they videotape themselves with their own cell phone. They put it somewhere and then they forget that it's there. So this could make a difference. But I mean, there we have the language We are not focusing on non-verbal behavior of our students.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, the last one.
Irene?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. It was very interesting. My question is, if you intervene to increase the student motivation, so in your model, which stage do you want to intervene? You get it?
I want to intervene.
If you give some intervention,
Okay, if I would like to have an intervention, okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
if you give, yeah.
I'm only interested in path modeling. No. But I have full respect of interventions. It's so complex and a lot to do. I mean, yeah, sure, teacher motivation is important, but we would need probably a different intervention if we want to trigger their interest or their self-efficacy or their goals. So I would go for teacher education. Please have more a greater focus on how students can stay tuned, can stay motivated if they have very difficult classrooms. This means self-efficacy, I think, is very, very important. That's what we work on. And I think that's worth it, because what is often the case is that in teacher education, if you ask them if they believe they can do stuff, they all say yes. But if they go to classrooms, you have this practice shock, and then you see that their self-efficacy is decreasing. So maybe it's worth training them to, if they are in the difficult situation, to still believe that they are capable to do things. So I think teacher self-efficacy interventions are really highly worth doing.
Then why not manipulating or intervening the teacher's behavior? Because teacher's behavior directly predict student motivation.
So I believe you need to tackle the source, not the outcome. And for me, behavior is just an outcome of motivation. So I can tell them, move your arm like this. But if they don't have the inner attitude and they don't know why they move their arm because they want to motivate students, they will move their arm in any instance, but they don't know the cause. So I think it's more worth going to the cause than going to actions.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
I think this is all great. John Marshall might have told you we had a plan to do some of this with tertiary educators, university lecturers, because they used to be recorded. We already have all of the recordings. And so we got both transcripts and visual data from that. And we would be getting the money to do it, but it does seem like you took this and which is amazing. Can I nerd out a little bit on the machine learning stuff?
Oh, yes, sure, but I'm not sure if I can answer it. I mean, I can try.
Yeah.
But my knowledge is like.
I just because we did some preliminary stuff, I'm really interested in the approach that you took. So for the non-verbal immediacy score, you took 3 off-the-shelf models to get sort of posture, facial expression, and
Of course.
Yeah. And then, am I right that then you trained a model based on those as inputs? And then
Yes.
when the graders were rating these, they were giving an overall score. And then you were trying to predict the beta score using those 3 things as inputs. Is that?
Let me go back to the pipeline. So what we're doing is we have different neural net, deep neural nets. So we have one here. Here it is. So there are these 3 components that we have. We had the 4th one. We couldn't do it. The kappa was not. The ICC values were not going anywhere. So we have humans rating facial. No, we have a library for facial expressions.
Yeah.
We have humans rating perceived distance. We have humans rating gesture intensity. Human ratings go into the ResNet model.
Yeah.
For example, for gesture intensity, go into the depth images network for perceived distance.
Yes.
We also have humans rating the overall score. So they also rate non-verbal immediacy because the model does not know how to combine the different components. So only humans, like we need an output. That's non-verbal immediacy. You should end up here. And that's why we also have humans rating on the slider scale non-verbal immediacy. Then the model knows these are the components. That's what I should end up with. And then it's combined and then the model is created.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And just out of curiosity, so when you assessed the model accuracy here, what was you showed the 80-20 split for the adult study.
Yes.
But is the 80-20 split done at the teacher level or is it done at the video level? Because one of the, I reviewed a couple of papers recently doing something similar with nutrition. And one of the mistakes seems to be that they take the out of sample data just from the 403 segments, but those segments are clustered by teacher.
Yeah.
And they have, it's a really, you want to remove whole teachers and use those as your evaluations. I'm just wondering if you did that or whether there are differences.
So I think we take the 400C segments
Yeah.
for the training, as you said, and ignore the clustering. And then afterwards, our analysis is how is that clustered and attributable to teachers.
Right.
But you're saying that this is biased because then we ignore the nested structure
Well,
already in the training process?
yeah, because of the nested structure, you end up, the model can learn cues from an individual teacher.
Yes.
And gets the opportunity to demonstrate that learning in that outcome
Right, okay.
on the test set.
Oh, that's
Because
interesting.
it's from that particular teacher. And so you'd be able to evaluate this in some of the other work that it sounds like you're doing, because those teachers are entirely out of sample. And so if you have human ratings of that data, that is an entirely valid validation set that you can use to evaluate the model. It would be entirely out of sample, is what I'm saying,
With other teachers or with the same teacher?
with other teachers.
Yes.
It sounds like there's video.
Yeah, that's what we want to do with
Yeah.
other teachers and to
Exactly.
validate this. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that would give you a better.
Okay, so that you're not teacher dependent. Yes. Okay, I understand. I understand. Yeah.
And so if you see a drop in accuracy from one study to the
It
other,
could be because of the teacher.
yeah, you might think about redoing the training
Yes.
such that. it
Okay.
doesn't-
Okay, that sounds very, very sensible. Thank you very much. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay.
From the time, any last question? Yes, just also acknowledge Jeremy's there, so thanks for your presentation on the use of AI and machine learning. It's like very potential pushing research boundaries, making sure you meet strong workflow, ethical guidelines, and better accuracy. So, any other questions? No, thanks very much. Please give a round of applause. Thank you, everyone online. Goodbye.
Bye. Okay.